Welcome back to BLOCKTV. It's time now for Links in the Chain. And in the regulatory black hole that dominates so much of the blockchain space is a critical challenge for workers and innovators utilizing the developing technology. Now, nowhere is this more true than in the quagmire of US regulatory authority. But as the industry matures, changes and develops, champions of the blockchain cause have emerged to protect industry interests. One such group is the Proof of Stake Alliance, and I speak now with founder Evan Weiss. Evan, thanks so much for being with us.
Appreciate it, Asher. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, so Evan, just to kick us off, tell us a little bit about the mission of the Proof of Stake Alliance, what you guys are working towards, and what your role is in the industry.
Great. Yeah, we're a group of about 20 different members, all that have a direct interest in the success of proof of stake consensus mechanism. We work together to engage with regulators and policymakers, really to start a discussion around this technology, help educate them on the potential of it, and try to build a regulatory framework that makes sure that innovation is important, but also protects consumers.
So, I mean, the focus in on proof of stake technology specifically, now obviously in the way that the cryptocurrency technology is developing, proof of stake is gaining a bigger percentage of the overall industry. But help our viewers to understand a little bit about the distinctions from a regulatory and engagement perspective that are presented from proof of stake technology versus potential other counterparts out there.
Yeah, perfect. So a big change in proof of stake is you're really moving away from having the security of the network rely on miners, so on electricity and hardware, to token holders, which creates new relationships and regulatory challenges. So it's really about making sure that we're able to make sure that participation is available for all types of token holders, whether that means accredited investors or just everyday consumers, so they're able to participate in these networks and help secure them.
Do you see as well, I mean, as we look about the sort of the regulatory environment in particular, looking there in the United States, I suppose I'm interested to know what particular challenges you feel proof of stake technology holds, in regards to regulatory sort of limitations or the way that governments are approaching cryptocurrency technology versus its proof of work counterparts. I mean, are there specific challenges that you're addressing, or do you think, well, I guess what I'm asking is why not have the industry work as a whole, under the crypto umbrella? Why have proof of stake technology center itself distinct from other facets of the industry?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we found kind of, when we first started looking at this technology and starting to engage with it as it was starting to launch with networks like Tezos and Cosmos and really gaining in popularity, there was a couple of discrete issues that we identified. And we thought, instead of having, the whole entire industry try to tackle these, it made sense to be really narrowly focused and tailored on specific issues. So a big one for us right now is taxation. How are these staking rewards treated? In reality, that it's really network inflation. And so we want to make sure that token holders who are participating in securing these networks are actually not being double taxed and taxed at the receipt of the reward, but only taxed at the disposition. Because you could have a huge tax liability here without any actual true income. So that's a big thing we've been focusing on. And there are a couple of securities and money transmission issues that we're also working with different regulatory agencies on as well.
Oh, that's super interesting. I mean, the sort of application of the technology in the real world, how that does distinguish between proof of work counterparts and what can be achieved with staking, and how that's implemented and rolled out, and how exchanges utilize that technology. Obviously, something that maybe from a technological perspective, not many were thinking about when developing, but there you have it, in that situation where it's actually being applied on the ground, governments have to figure out a way to deal with that. So in sort of framing it in that way, what successes have you guys achieved so far as an alliance in working with government regulators there in the US?
So we've had a lot of success just getting in the door and really telling this story of why this is important to, the agencies have actually been really great in trying to learn about this. They're really well read up on the technology. They want to understand it, especially from the US front. A big thing here is mining is based off of, to be successful in mining, it's a lot about, cheap access to cheap electricity and hardware, where staking is based off of trust, reliability, excellence. Those are things that American companies have won on and been great on for years. And so we're trying to tell that story to American lawmakers to make sure they understand that we need to create a regulatory framework here to make sure that this technology is successful in the US. And so it's really about telling a story about why this is actually meant to be created here and really grown here, like we did with the internet in the early 90s.
In the course of my work as a journalist in the cryptocurrency world, I meet a lot of Bitcoin maximalists, for example, as one distinct group who would say, for whatever one way or the other, proof of work technology is key, is central. Here you are advocating for proof of stake technology. Do you think that the success of one comes at the expense of the other, or in your framework, is it a rising tide lifts all ships sort of situation?
A total rising tide lifts all ships. I mean, we're obviously, personally, I'm a big fan of Bitcoin. I think these things will live in harmony together. But we think that, there are a lot of groups doing great work around Bitcoin, like Coin Center, like the Blockchain Association, like the Chambers, who are really fighting that fight. And we totally appreciate that. Our goal here is to make sure that we're focusing on this new innovative technology and helping to make sure that it gets attention, and working with those groups to make sure that all of this technology can be built and grown here in the U.S. and abroad.
Evan, do you see this mostly as an issue of education, or do you think it's about setting policy while this industry is still in its infancy?
I think currently we're early days. I think a lot right now it's about education. It's about telling a really strong story. We've published a 30-page tax policy piece that really talks about this industry and why it should be grown here. And a big part of what we've been doing on the Hill is telling that story. And it is early days, but we've already gotten really warm reception from both sides of the house, which is great to see this not really be a bipartisan issue. It's really about growing a new economy in the U.S. and making sure that we're successful like we were with the internet.
Important work to be sure, but let's briefly get into the nitty-gritty for a moment. You mentioned some of that taxation work that's critical for proof of stake, not getting the double taxation elements, but can you sort of address for us some of the key issues that you at the Proof of Stake Alliance are specifically targeting and working on with government and regulatory officials at the moment?
The big one currently is the taxation piece. So that's what we're really focused on. We're also engaging with some securities regulators as well around kind of the relationship between if I delegate tokens to a service provider, someone who helps validate transactions, which is the company that my full-time job is at Bison Trails. I'm the chief of staff, and we are democratizing access to these blockchains by allowing token holders to participate. So making sure that relationship is seen exactly what it is, which is a service provider relationship, where these service providers compete on security, excellence, reliability. So between those two, it's really been a huge focus with us right now.
All right, well, it sounds like you guys are doing some critical work there in that regulatory space, trying to reframe some of the conversations that are being had in and around government about how to approach the cryptocurrency and digital asset space. Evan Weiss, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us and break down some of these key issues that you guys are working on. We'll be fascinated to hear developments as they come through. And for those watching, stay with us at blocktv.com for all the latest news and information. I'm Asher Westropp-Evans. Thanks for watching.
For more news and updates, follow us on Twitter